The rain had been falling all day. Not the heavy kind that crashes against your windshield, but the soft, creeping kind that seeps into everything. It was the kind of rain that makes the sky look like it forgot how to be blue. The kind that feels like it's not just outside the car. It's inside your bones. Jason sat behind the wheel of his old silver Honda, knuckles pale from gripping the steering wheel. The heater was barely working, and the GPS had glitched twice in the past hour. He glanced down at it again. The blue arrow was frozen, sitting on a pale gray line that wound into an endless patch of green. The screen blinked, then spoke in a mechanical, almost tired voice. Turn right in 100 meters. He squinted through the windshield. The road ahead curved sharply, swallowed by thick trees on both sides. Gray Pines, the town he was headed to, wasn't even marked on most maps anymore. He had to dig up a PDF someone posted on an old forum just to find directions. It had been 20 years since anyone talked about it. Maybe longer. Jason took a turn. The forest closed in. The trees weren't just tall, they were towering. Their trunks were thick, twisted, and slick with moss. The branches above wove together like a roof, turning the afternoon into a dim, green twilight. The pavement turned to gravel, then to cracked concrete, then to dirt. The GPS blinked once more, then died, that NO signal. No map, no help. Jason let out a long breath that he was here because of a letter. A real letter, not an email. Cream-colored envelope, no return address, but his name in neat handwriting on the front. Inside was one line. You are the last of us. The house is yours. Come home. Signed, Uncle Matthew. Jason didn't remember much about Uncle Matthew. His mother used to whisper about him, never using his name. Just my brother. He was the one no one talked about, the one who chose to live away from the world. Jason had seen him once, maybe twice when he was a kid. A tall, thin man with deep eyes and a quiet voice. That's all he could recall. The house he left behind had been sitting alone in Gray Pines ever since he died. No one wanted it. No one came for it. Not even the bank. Just dust and memories now. And apparently, Jason. The trees thinned suddenly, and there it was. The house that IT stood at the end of a narrow clearing, where the dirt path widened into a rough circle of cracked stone and weeds. The structure was tall, almost too tall and old, but not falling apart. Just waiting. The wood was dark, almost black from the rain. The windows were tall and narrow, their glass fogged like someone had been breathing on them from the inside. Jason parked the car and turned off the engine. Silence fell instantly. It wasn't the usual kind of silence, either. It was thick, heavy, like the forest itself was holding its breath that he stepped out. His boots crunched on wet gravel. The air was cold and smelled of pine, damp soil, and something else, faint, metallic, like old pennies. The front porch creaked as he walked up. The boards were warped, bowed in the middle, but they held. A single rocking chair sat in the corner, still, waiting. A ceramic mug rested on the windowsill next to it, half filled with something dark that might have been coffee once. Or not. Jason reached for the door. It opened before he touched it, just a little, just enough that he froze. Wind? No wind. The trees weren't moving. The air wasn't moving. Only the door that he stepped inside. The first thing he noticed was the smell. Old wood, yes. But beneath that, mildew, wet stone, and a faint sweetness, like flowers that had died a long time ago but never quite rotted. The second thing he noticed was the cold. Not just temperature cold. The kind of cold that settles in your ribs. The kind that doesn't go away. The entry hall stretched out ahead of him, dark and narrow. Faded wallpaper peeled like skin from the walls. A coat rack stood near the door, one hook still holding a long brown overcoat that looked like it belonged to another century. The air was still. Jason cleared his throat. "Hello," he called softly, not because he expected an answer, but because it felt wrong not to that N-O reply that he stepped further in. The floorboards groaned under his weight. The sound echoed through the house like it was being repeated by someone upstairs. To his left was a large room with a high ceiling, probably a parlor once. Now it held only a dusty piano, covered with a sheet, and a fireplace with ashes that didn't look that old. To his right, a narrow corridor disappeared into shadow. Straight ahead was a staircase. Jason moved toward it slowly. His eyes scanned the walls. Portraits hung crooked, some torn. The faces inside them were faded, but the expressions seemed off, like they'd been painted to look pleasant, but changed their minds halfway through. That he paused at the base of the stairs. Each step was worn in the middle, like hundreds of feet had climbed them. A thick layer of dust covered the railing, except where a handprint had wiped it away. Jason touched the railing. Cold, damp. That he put one foot on the first step. Creak. Another. Creak. Halfway up, something whispered. It was so soft, he almost didn't hear it. That it came from behind him. He turned. Nothing. He climbed faster. At the top, the hallway was even darker. He clicked on the flashlight on his phone, but the beam was weak. Still, it showed enough. The long hallway stretched both ways, lined with closed doors. Every door was old, with iron handles and keyholes. One door at the far end was cracked open. Jason's feet moved on their own. He didn't want to go there. He really didn't. But something in him, curiosity, or maybe something the house had already slipped into his mind, kept walking. The door opened with a dry moan. Inside was a child's bedroom. The wallpaper was pale blue, covered in stars and moons, torn and faded. A small bed sat against the wall, its covers perfectly smooth. On the windowsill, a music box sat open, its tiny ballerina frozen mid-spin. And on the rocking chair in the corner, a doll. Jason froze. The doll's face was porcelain, cracked near the mouth. Its eyes were glass, one cloudy, the other two clear. It wore a faded pink dress and black shoes. Its arms were posed gently on its lap. But what struck Jason wasn't how creepy it looked. That it was that he knew it, that he remembered it from somewhere. He walked closer, slowly, heart pounding. That on the wall above the bed, scratched deep into the paint, were the words, "She never sleeps." Jason swallowed hard. The flashlight flickered. The air felt thicker in here, like it didn't want him to breathe. That he turned to leave. The rocking chair moved, just an inch. But it moved. That he didn't look back. That he walked out fast, pulling the door shut behind him. Just as it clicked, he heard the faint sound of something behind the door. Rocking, slow, steady. Jason walked back down the hallway, footsteps shaky. But as he passed the mirror at the top of the stairs, he saw something that stopped him cold. His reflection, standing still, not moving, watching him and smiling. Jason stood frozen at the top of the stairs, staring into the mirror. His reflection stared back. But it wasn't right. In the mirror, he was smiling, just slightly. A thin, tight smile that didn't reach his eyes. He wasn't smiling in real life. He was sure of that. His own face looked off, like it had been painted by someone who had seen him once, long ago, and didn't quite remember the details. He blinked. So did the reflection. But there was a delay, not even a full second, but just enough to make his stomach turn. Jason stepped back, away from the mirror. His breath was loud in the quiet hallway. The silence around him seemed to lean in closer, like the house had tilted just enough to press its weight against his ears. No wind, no ticking clock, not even the sound of rain anymore. He looked toward the stairs, tempted to go back down, but something pulled at him. Not physically, more like a suggestion, a gentle tug in the air around him. Back down the hallway, back to that room. No, he had closed that door. The child's room with the doll, that was over. It had to be. He wasn't going back in there. But the house had other plans. As he walked toward the stairs, something creaked behind him. Slow, deep, the unmistakable sound of the rocking chair. Jason turned around, and the hallway looked longer than it had before. Too long. The angles were wrong, like the walls had stretched slightly when he wasn't looking. The door he'd closed, it was open again, wide. The doll was gone from a chair. He didn't scream, but his throat felt tight, like it was trying to. His flashlight flickered again, casting long, broken shadows across the floor. Jason stepped forward, against every instinct in his body. He felt like a swimmer stepping back into deep water after nearly drowning. He reached the room, now darker than before. No glow from the window, just shadow. Inside, everything was still. But now, on the bed where the doll had once been sitting, lay a small book. He hesitated, then picked it up. The leather was soft, worn smooth like it had been held 1,000 times. Inside were pages filled with a child's handwriting, shaky, uneven, pressed deep into the paper with force. The first page read, "My name is Elsie. If you're reading this, then you're in the house. Don't stay." Jason turned the page. She doesn't like when people come upstairs, especially boys. She gets angry. She watches from the walls, from the mirrors, from the cracks. You can't run from her. She's at the house. Page after page was filled with strange drawings. A tall, thin figure with no eyes. A door that was never the same shape twice. A house with windows shaped like screaming mouths. Jason's hands shook as he flipped through the journal. One page near the end had only a single line, scratched over and over until the paper tore. She never sleeps. She never sleeps. She never sleeps. Behind him, the door creaked slowly shut. Jason spun around. No one there. But the air had changed. He could feel it, thick, cold, charged with something that prickled his skin like static. The rocking chair started moving again. He hadn't touched it. The flashlight flickered and went out. Darkness. Utter complete. He held his breath. And then, a whisper. Right next to his ear. Not behind him. Not across the room. Right next to his ear. So close he could feel the breath. Mine. Jason stumbled backward, hitting the wall. Heart pounding so hard it felt like it might bruise his ribs. He fumbled for his phone, turned the flashlight back on. The room was empty. No doll. No voice. But now the mirror on the opposite wall had changed. It didn't reflect the room. It reflected something else, something deeper. A corridor he hadn't seen before, with flickering lights, old wallpaper, and someone standing at the far end. Small, child-sized, motionless. Jason blinked. The image in the mirror didn't. He stepped forward. 1 foot. 2. The reflection didn't move. He waved his hand. The mirror didn't reflect it. That thing in the mirror was not him. It was the girl from the journal. Elsie. She opened her mouth. No sound came out, but her lips moved slowly, carefully. Jason read them. Behind you. He turned and saw nothing, but the temperature dropped. His breath fogged in front of him, and the air tasted of rust. The faint sound of music began to play. A child's lullaby, soft and slow. The kind of tune that plays in a dream right before you realize it's a nightmare. Jason stumbled out of a room, clutching the journal. The hallway was darker than before, longer, or maybe it had always been this long, and he just hadn't noticed. As he walked, the floor creaked behind him, not once, not twice, but in a slow rhythm, like footsteps, light ones, bare feet. He didn't look back, not this time. Instead, he turned toward a door at the end of the hall that hadn't been opened before, the door to the master bedroom. He pushed it open, slowly. Inside was a room frozen in time. A large bed with a canopy of dust. A dresser with broken handles. A cracked window letting in weak gray light. And across from the bed another mirror. This one was huge, framed in black with that twisted into strange shapes. Birds, maybe. Or something with wings. Maybe they were mouths. He stepped toward it. His reflection was there again. Normal. Except for one thing. The reflection of the room behind him wasn't right. In the mirror, the hallway behind him was filled with people. Dozens of them, standing still, all facing him. Their faces were blurred, smudged, like someone had erased them. Jason turned around in real life. Nothing. Empty hallway. He turned back to the mirror. The figures were closer now. He backed away. Something moved under the bed. He knelt down slowly and lifted the blanket. Underneath was nothing. Just dust. Wood. Silence. Then he heard the sound again. The music. That same lullaby. But now it was coming from inside the mirror. The glass began to fog from the inside. Jason stood still. A handprint appeared on the mirror, small, child-sized, pressing against the glass from the other side. Then another, and another, and another. They began to tap, one by one, like fingers drumming. Tap, 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 tap. The mirror began to crack. Jason ran from the room, down the hall, past the child's room, past the broken portraits, and back toward the stairs. But the hallway didn't end. He kept running, and running, until he stopped. because ahead of him, somehow, was the same mirror, waiting. The hallway had folded, wrapped him in, trapped him. The doll was there now, sitting beneath the mirror, its head tilted slightly, its mouth cracked open wider than before. Jason turned away, shaking, breathing hard, and the door beside him opened on its own. He looked inside. It was a bathroom. Tiny mold climbing the tiles. A bathtub full of water, so dark it looked like ink. Above the tub, words had been scratched into the mirror. She waits in the water. He backed away but slipped. His hand hit the wall. It felt warm, wet. He looked down. A trail of water was seeping out from beneath the tub, and something moved beneath the surface. Something pale and long. Jason stumbled away again, heart thudding so loud he could barely hear the house anymore. But the house heard him, every breath, every footstep. It knew he was there, and now it was beginning to open its other doors. Jason gripped the banister as he finally found the stairs again. It felt like hours had passed, though he hadn't seen a clock since entering the house. His legs were shaking not from the run, but from something deeper, a buzzing under his skin, a hum in his bones. The hallway behind him fell silent. The whispers, the tapping, the lullaby gone. But silence here was never safe. He took each step down carefully. The stairs groaned louder now, as if complaining about every inch of weight. As he reached the landing, he noticed something he hadn't seen when he first arrived. There was a second door near the back of the house. He could have sworn it wasn't there earlier. It was half hidden behind a wooden shelf stacked with dusty tins, old tools, and a broken lantern. The shelf didn't look like it had been moved in years, but somehow there it was, blocking the doorway just enough to keep it secret. Jason stared at it. Something inside him whispered, "Don't." But his hand moved anyway. He reached for the shelf and pulled. It scraped loudly across the wood floor. Dust exploded into the air, making him cough. Behind it, the door stood waiting. It was narrow, painted the same pale gray as the walls, with a heavy iron latch. Unlike the other doors in the house, this one had no handle, only a ring-shaped pull. Jason hesitated, then gripped the ring and yanked. The latch snapped up with a sound like breaking bones. The door swung open. A set of stairs led downward into pitch black. The air that drifted out was wet and cold, colder than the rest of the house. It smelled of mildew, soil, and something deeper, something rotten, hidden far beneath. The kind of scent you find in the deepest corners of an old cellar that hasn't been opened in decades. Jason switched on his flashlight. The stairs vanished into the dark. He took a deep breath and stepped inside. The door didn't close behind him. It slammed, hard. The sound echoed down the stairs like a gunshot. Jason spun around and grabbed the door, but it wouldn't budge. No matter how he pulled or kicked or slammed his shoulder against it, it wouldn't open. The house had made up its mind. It wanted him to go down, and so with no choice he did. Each step creaked, louder than the last. The beam from his flashlight bounced on the walls, revealing damp stone and narrow, slick stairs. The deeper he went, the colder it got. His breath became visible, puffing out in small clouds that disappeared into the darkness. After 20 steps, the staircase leveled out. He found himself in a low-ceilinged basement. The air was still thick. A weak bulb hung from a chain in the center, swaying gently though there was no breeze. It flickered dimly, casting long, crawling shadows on the stone walls. Jason stepped forward. The ground beneath him wasn't concrete. It was packed dirt, uneven, damp. Shelves lined the walls, covered in cobwebs and rusting tools. Glass jars sat in rows, most of them empty. Some weren't. He leaned in to look at one, and immediately recoiled. Inside was a lump of hair, floating in cloudy yellow liquid. Another jar held something worse, a doll's hand. Or a child's. He couldn't be sure. He turned away, stomach churning. Then he saw the handprints. On the far wall, dozens of them, small, faint, and pressed into the dirt and dust. Each one pointed to the same place, a wooden chest in the corner. Jason felt himself walking toward it. He didn't want to. Every part of him screamed to stop, but his legs moved on their own, like they were listening to something his mind couldn't hear. The chest was old, reinforced with rusted iron. A padlock hung from the latch, but it wasn't locked. He flipped it open. The lid groaned. Inside, nothing. Just darkness. Deep and endless. He leaned in slightly, shining the flashlight inside. And something looked back. Two pale eyes far below, deep in the dark. Round and wide. Not blinking. He staggered back, slamming the lid shut. The basement light flickered violently. Then went out. Total darkness. Jason froze, heart racing. He listened. Nothing. Then, knock. A single slow knock from the chest. Then, another. And another. Jason stepped backward. But his foot touched something cold. He looked down. A small porcelain arm. Just lying on the dirt. Unattached to anything. He backed into the shelves, nearly knocking them over. His flashlight flickered on again for a second. And in that moment, he saw something crawling across the ceiling. Thin limbs. Pale skin. It moved like a spider, but looked like a child. Then the light died. Jason bolted. He turned toward where he thought the stairs were, feeling along the walls. But they were gone. There was only more stone, more shelves, more jars. He was somewhere else now. The basement had changed. Or he had. He turned left, then right, but the room never ended. It stretched on forever. A maze of darkness and things just out of sight. The walls whispered now. Not in words, but in sounds, breathing, crying, scratching. A distant lullaby began to play again. Jason stumbled forward, gripping the flashlight like a weapon. He saw a doorway up ahead, a narrow opening with faint light behind it. He ran through the door and found himself in a different room. Brick walls, low ceiling, a single chair in the center. Sitting in the chair was a woman. Her head was bowed. Her hair was long, black, tangled. She wore a tattered, white nightgown soaked at the bottom with something dark. She was humming the same lullaby. Jason froze. The woman lifted her head slowly. Her eyes were hollow, not empty, hollow, like someone had scooped them out and filled them with shadows. Her mouth moved. "Elsie," she whispered. "You came back." Jason stepped backward. "I'm not." But she stood. Her body crackled like paper, folding the wrong way. "You left me here," she said. "You left me in the dark, alone." "I don't know you," Jason said, voice cracking. "I don't know who you are." She tilted her head. "You will." She raised one hand and pointed. The walls around her pulsed, and suddenly, dozens of dolls fell from the ceiling. They landed in a circle around her feet, some broken, some whole, all facing Jason. Their eyes opened. All at once, the lights blew out again. Jason ran. He didn't care where, he just moved. Through another door, up a new staircase, into another hallway that should not have existed. But it did now. And at the end of that hallway, there was a mirror. Again, he stepped in front of it. And there was no reflection, just darkness, until his own face slowly faded in, staring back at him. Except now, the eyes were hollow, the same as the woman's. He screamed and swung the flashlight at the mirror. Glass shattered everywhere. When he looked down, the broken pieces reflected something behind him. A doll, climbing the stairs, one step at a time. Jason ran. Finally, he found the original stairs. He scrambled up them, taking 3 at a time, and slammed into the basement door. This time it opened. He burst into the kitchen, panting, shaking. But something had changed. The house was darker now, angrier, and waiting. Jason leaned against the kitchen counter, panting hard. His body trembled with exhaustion. But it wasn't just from running. The house felt different now. The walls, the floorboards, even the air, everything pulsed. It was like being inside something that breathed. The wallpaper curled and uncurled at the edges. The ceiling creaked not from wind or age, but from something pacing above. He needed to get out. Now, he grabbed the flashlight, flicked it back on, and pointed it toward the front door. Still closed. Still no handle. Still no way out. He walked toward it, grabbed the edges with both hands and pulled. Nothing. He kicked it. Still nothing. Jason pressed his forehead against the cold wood, trying to think. His mind spun through the basement, the pale woman, the dolls, the voice in the dark. It all felt connected. Somehow. Then he heard it. Not whispering, not tapping. Something heavier. Thump. It came from upstairs. Thump. Again. Like someone was dragging something heavy across the floor. Jason turned slowly. At the base of the staircase, he noticed something new. A painting. No, a portrait, framed in gold, cracked glass. It hadn't been there before. It showed a woman, early 40s, pale, thin lips, wide eyes. She wore a long black dress and stood in front of the very house Jason now stood in. Her hands were folded at her waist. Her expression looked almost kind, if not for the eyes. They were watching him, not in the usual painting way, but really watching. The pupils followed him when he moved. He walked past it cautiously and started up the stairs again, every instinct in his body screaming not to. Each step groaned louder than before. The house wasn't just old, it was awake. At the top, the hallway looked different again. The air was foggy, like someone had lit 100 candles and blown them out at once. It smelled like dust, wax, and something else. Paint thinner? Jason's light flicked along the walls. More portraits, dozens of them, where there had been only peeling wallpaper before. Now every inch of wall space was filled with portraits. Each frame a little different, carved wood, silver trim, tarnished metal. And inside, each one was someone else. Old men, children, young women, couples. Most were in black and white, their faces worn with age. But the strangest thing? Some of them looked familiar. Jason stepped closer to one and felt his stomach twist. It was a portrait of the child from the journal, Elsie. Same long hair, same pale face, same dress. She wasn't smiling. Her eyes were just empty. The nameplate below the frame read, Elsie Mae Whitmore, 1912 to 1919. She saw what she wasn't meant to. Jason backed away, bumping into the wall behind him. He turned. Another portrait. A young man, smiling slightly, with a dark suit and one hand tucked into his coat. Jason couldn't place it right away, until he noticed the eyes. Deep set, heavy. His uncle. The nameplate read, Matthew Gideon, 1962 to 2004. He opened the door that should have stayed closed. Jason swallowed hard. A chill ran down his spine. He moved to the next one. It was a woman. The same woman he saw in the basement. Her face was clearer now, the shadows removed. Still haunting, but unmistakable. Her plate read, Henrietta Whitmore, 1870 to 1920. She watches still. Jason moved faster now, scanning each face. Row after row of people, each staring out with silent eyes. Some looked solemn. Some looked afraid. Others were smiling. Not warm smiles, but tight, knowing smiles. He came to the end of the hall and stopped. There was one more portrait, larger than the rest, still dusty. His own face, not a photograph, a painted portrait. Jason, exactly as he looked now. Same clothes, same expression, same tired eyes. But in the painting, his eyes were looking up at something, and his lips were curled in a tiny, almost invisible smile. The nameplate read, Jason Whitmore, 1996. He never left. Jason stepped back, heart pounding. No, he whispered. That wasn't there before. He turned to leave, and that's when the lights flickered. The entire hallway blinked. Once, twice. Then the light stayed on. But now the portraits had changed. Every face had turned. Now, they were all looking at him. Every single one. Jason's flashlight slipped from his hand and clattered to the floor. The bulb rolled in a circle, spinning light across the walls. Eyes stared back from every angle. He ran, down the stairs. But the house wasn't the same now. The staircase stretched longer, much longer. Steps grew taller. The light above grew smaller. And just when he thought he couldn't run anymore, he hit the bottom. Hard. The floor beneath him was marble now. Smooth, black, and polished. He stood slowly. He was in a new room. Not just a part of the house, something deeper. Hidden. Sacred in a twisted way. It looked like a gallery. Paintings lined the walls here too. But they weren't old. These were fresh. Wet. Some of them still dripped paint onto the black floor. In the center of the room sat an easel. On it a blank canvas. A palette of dark oils rested on a nearby stool, and standing beside it was the woman, Henrietta. She looked up at Jason. Her eyes were hollow now, her mouth too wide. She lifted her hand. In it, a brush soaked in red. "You finally arrived," she whispered. Jason stepped backward, but found himself frozen. His legs wouldn't move. She turned to the canvas and began to paint. The strokes were slow, steady. Jason wanted to run, scream, anything, but he couldn't. The room spun. The walls breathed. The lights flickered. And slowly, his body turned on its own, facing the canvas. She was painting him, not just a portrait, a scene. He was standing in the house, in this very room. But behind him, in the painting, the dolls crawled down the walls, and a shadow stood behind his shoulder. Jason turned in real life. No one there. Back to the painting. Now the shadow in the image had its hand on his shoulder. He could feel it now. In real life. Cold. Slowly tightening. He screamed. But no sound came out. The brush moved faster. The painting got darker. The room got colder. And then he blinked. And he was back. Standing in the hallway. The portraits were gone. All of them. No frames. No faces. Just wallpaper again. Ripped. Yellowed. The house felt calmer. But that wasn't comforting. Not here. Not now. Jason turned to the nearest mirror. His reflection stared back, smiling. And behind it, the paintings were still there. He reached out and touched the glass. It rippled, just slightly, like water. Jason's finger hovered just a few inches from the mirror. The surface shimmered again, only for a moment, like a calm pond stirred by breath. The reflection stared back, but Jason wasn't sure it was really his anymore. His face looked a little too still. His chest didn't rise and fall in sync with his breathing. And worst of all, his eyes were smiling. He wasn't smiling. He pulled his hand away, heart thumping wildly. The hallway behind him was still empty, still silent. But he felt something watching. Not from behind, not above, from the mirror. It wasn't just a reflection. It was a window, and something was watching from the other side. Jason stepped back, then turned and hurried down the hall. He didn't care where he was going anymore, just as long as it wasn't there. But the house was shifting again. The hallway ended in a wall that hadn't been there before. Just smooth, cracked plaster with no doors. No windows. He turned to go back, and found himself facing a different corridor entirely. Narrower, walls closer together, the ceiling lower, and every few feet along the wall, another mirror, each one different. Some tall, some small, some broken. The frames were mismatched, wood, rusted iron, twisted wire. Some looked handmade. Others looked like they'd been pulled from the bottom of an ocean and hung up without cleaning them off. Jason walked slowly. His flashlight dimmed again. The beam only lit a few feet ahead. As he moved, he passed each mirror and saw himself, or versions of himself. In the first mirror, his eyes were gone. Just smooth skin where they should have been. In the next, he had no mouth. In another, he looked normal, except his reflection didn't move with him. It just stood there still and stared. Jason's throat tightened. He tried not to look, but it was impossible. Each mirror pulled his eyes toward it. Each one whispered things he couldn't quite hear, soft, sharp sounds like words buried underwater. He came to a door at the end of the hallway. No handle, no hinges, just a surface polished to a perfect black reflection. It was a mirror, tall as the doorway itself. Jason stared at it. This one showed the hallway behind him endless. But when he turned to check, it wasn't the same. There was no hallway behind him anymore. Only the door he had entered through now gone. Just walls. He looked back at the mirror. The hallway inside the reflection was still there, long stretching into shadow. And then something stepped into it. A figure, distant, walking slowly toward him. Jason backed away, but the reflection remained the same. The hallway in the mirror didn't change with his movement. It kept going, and the figure inside kept walking forward. Closer, closer. Jason turned and slammed his hand against the wall beside the mirror, looking for anything. A latch, a crack, a way out, but the walls were solid. Then he looked back at the mirror again. The figure was now only a few feet away on the other side. It was a woman. Long black hair. White nightgown torn at the hem. Her eyes weren't there. Just dark holes that stretched too wide. She lifted her hand and pressed it against the inside of the glass. Jason watched in horror as the mirror surface bulged where her hand met it. Like rubber. Like water. Like skin. It pulsed. Then split. A thin crack ran across the mirror from top to bottom. Jason backed up, heart hammering. The crack widened. The glass rippled outward as the figure pressed forward. Then the surface shattered. Not like normal glass. It didn't explode. It peeled. Long, slow strips of mirrored surface rolled back like skin, revealing a dark hallway on the other side. Jason stepped forward, stunned. The air that came out smelled cold. That's the only way he could describe it. Cold and metallic. Like the smell inside a freezer filled with old coins. There was no turning back now. He stepped through the mirror and entered the hallway from the reflection. It was darker here. The walls were narrower. The air tighter. He walked slowly, flashlight beam shaking. The floor creaked beneath his feet. His footsteps echoed too loudly. They didn't match his pace. They were one beat behind. Like someone was walking just out of sight, perfectly mirroring his movements. He passed another mirror. This one showed the hallway behind him. Except he wasn't alone in the reflection. There was a child standing behind him. Jason whipped around. Nothing. He turned back. The child was closer now in the mirror. A little girl. Pale. Hair covering her face. He turned again. Still nothing. He took a step backward. The mirror child moved too. She tilted her head. Jason ran. Through the corridor. Past rows of mirrors. Each one showed something different now. Faces in the dark. Figures watching him from corners. Himself screaming silently. He burst into a circular room at the end. Every wall was a mirror. Jason spun in the center, breathing hard. His reflection was everywhere. But each one showed a different version of him. One looked older. One was bruised and bleeding. One was hanging from the ceiling by his wrists. He turned away. The mirrors began to hum, low and deep, like voices chanting from far below the floor. The light dimmed. In each mirror, shadows formed behind his reflection. Dozens of them, hands reaching, grinning faces. Jason shouted, "Stop." Everything froze. Every reflection looked at him at once. And then a voice, soft, female, echoing from every wall. "You shouldn't have come." The mirrors flickered. Jason's vision blurred. Then everything changed. The mirrors vanished. The room turned pitch black. He couldn't see his hand in front of his face. And then the mirror room returned. But now it was filled with people. Reflections? No, real. Standing all around him. Silent. Each one of them had blank, white eyes. Mouths that hung open but made no sound. They stepped forward together. Jason stumbled backward until his back hit glass. Trapped. The nearest figure reached out. Not to grab. To touch. Her finger met Jason's forehead. Cold. Dry. And Jason's mind exploded with images. He saw the house as it once was, filled with people smiling, drinking, laughing. Then silence. Then screams. Children crying. Doors slamming. The mirror in the parlor cracking as something crawled through. He saw Henrietta, sitting in the mirror room, weeping, whispering to her reflection. He saw Elsie, standing at the top of the stairs, mouth sewn shut. He saw himself, not now, from before. A little boy, standing in this very room. The image vanished. Jason gasped and dropped to his knees. The mirrors faded again, back into plain walls. He was alone, but his reflection still stared from every direction. And each version of him was smiling. One by one, the reflections turned and walked away, vanishing into the mirrors. Jason stood. The mirror door he entered through was gone. In its place, another hallway. He stepped into it. And now the house had grown silent again. But the silence was worse now, because it felt final, like the calm breath before the scream. And as he walked forward toward the next room, the house whispered once more, this time not into his ears, but directly into his mind. "You are home." Jason stepped into the new hallway, the doorless frame sealing itself behind him like flesh growing over a wound. The silence pressed against his ears so hard it was almost a sound. It made his head ache and his thoughts feel heavy, like each one had to push through syrup to form. The only noise was his own breathing, slow, shallow, and unsure. The hallway here was different. Not crumbling and rotted like the others. This one was preserved. Wallpaper with swirling floral designs clung tightly to the walls, yellowed only slightly by time. The wood beneath his feet was polished and clean, not a single creak as he walked. Candles flickered in brass sconces, casting golden light that made the air seem almost warm. But it wasn't. The warmth was a lie. Jason could feel it in his bones. The same way you know a smile isn't real when the eyes don't join in. This place wanted him to feel safe. It was pretending. At the end of the hallway, he reached a door, old, with a brass knob and a keyhole shaped like an eye. Jason turned the handle slowly, heart pounding again. The room inside looked like a study. A large desk sat near the window, which wasn't really a window at all, just a frame with painted glass. No light came through it. No outside world existed anymore. Books lined the walls, shelves upon shelves of leather-bound volumes, some so ancient they looked fossilized. Others were clean new. A few still had price tags on the covers, like they'd just been bought last week. Jason moved carefully around the desk. There was a chair tucked under it. A green reading lamp, dusty but functional, sat near a closed leather book, a diary. He reached for it, his fingers brushing the surface. It was warm. He paused, then opened it. The first page was blank, except for a single sentence written in shaking handwriting. If you're reading this, you're already part of the house. Jason swallowed and flipped to the next page. The writing was frantic. Dark lines pressed hard into the paper, as if the writer was desperate for anyone to understand. October 6th, 1987. I heard it whisper again last night. Not through the walls this time, through the mirror. It said my name. It said it was my mother. But my mother died in this house 40 years ago. I know better than to answer now. I made the mistake once. I won't do it again. Jason flipped the page. October 9th, 1987. The portraits move when I'm not looking. I caught one changing. A woman blinked, and then she was smiling. Her eyes followed me all the way down the hall. I covered them with sheets, but the fabric rotted away by morning. This house doesn't like being blind. Another page. October 15th, 1987. I found the hidden room, behind the bookcase in the northeast study. You have to pull the red book, the one without a title. It swings open, but you shouldn't go in there. You'll see them. They are not sleeping. They are waiting. Jason stopped. He looked up slowly at the wall of books behind the desk. His eyes scanned the spines until he saw it, a red book. No title. No dust. Jason stood and approached it, heartbeat hammering in his ears. He reached out and pulled the book gently. Click. The book didn't come free. The shelf trembled. Then, with a low groan, the entire case swung forward like a door, revealing a narrow stairway behind it. The air that flowed out smelled like mold and something coppery, like old blood. Jason aimed his flashlight down the steps. They twisted into darkness. He hesitated, but only for a moment. Then he stepped through. The stairway was tighter than the others. The walls were stone now, not wood. Moisture clung to the surfaces. The air was colder here. Not pretend cold like before, but real. Sharp. Stinging. The steps went down for longer than they should have. Jason began counting them. 20, 40, 60, 80. He stopped at 99. The stairs ended in a low, rectangular room with a domed ceiling. Candles flickered from the walls. Not flame, but something like flame. Pale and white, almost like electric static. In the center of the room was a table, and on the table were dozens of journals, diaries, notebooks, each one open, each one written in different handwriting. Jason walked to the table and saw that every diary had one thing in common. They all ended with a drawing. Not a name, not a date. A drawing, a spiral, a perfect, endless swirl in black ink. Underneath the spiral in every book were the same final words. The house is me. Jason turned in a slow circle. Along the curved walls of the room were beds, simple wooden frames with dusty mattresses, and on each bed lay a body, not fresh, but not decomposed either, perfectly preserved. Some were children, some were adults. Their eyes were closed, their hands folded neatly over their chests. They looked peaceful, but Jason knew better. He walked between the beds, reading the small brass nameplates at their feet. Elsie Mae Whitmore, died 1919. Daniel Thomas Whitmore, died 1952. Laura Wells, died 1987. Matthew Gideon, died 2004. His uncle. Jason stepped back, breath catching in his throat. This wasn't just a resting place. It was a collection. The house kept them, held them, and if he stayed, there'd be a bed here with his name too. He turned to leave, but the stairway was gone. Just smooth wall now. The only way out was forward. At the back of the room, another door had appeared. Jason moved to it. This one was made of blackwood, knotted and split like it had grown from the floor. He pressed his hand against it. It was warm and beating, like a heart. He pushed it open. Inside was a room of mirrors, but not like before. These were long, vertical, like windows. Each one showed a moment from his life. One showed him as a boy running in the park. Another showed him crying in his room after his mother died. Another showed the moment he stepped into this house. And another showed now, Jason, standing in this room, and behind him, the beds. Only now, the bodies were sitting up, their eyes open, all of them. Jason turned. The room behind him was still. The bodies still rested. But in the mirror, they stood. They walked. They smiled. And behind them all, in the center of the room, was the spiral. Huge, swirling, moving. It wasn't ink. It wasn't paint. It was alive. The spiral pulsed, turning slowly, drawing everything toward it. Jason looked back at the reflection. The spiral kept growing, spreading across the walls, over the floor, until it filled the mirror entirely. And then it reached through. A single thread of black spiral curled out from the mirror's surface and touched Jason's chest. Cold, soft. He gasped, and everything turned white. A flash. A single moment of pure, blinding light. And then, silence, darkness, and breathing. Not his. The sound of something breathing all around him. Jason opened his eyes. He was lying on a bed, in the mirror room, the real one. The candles flickered around him. He sat up. No spiral. No mirrors. Just stone walls and silence. And in the corner of the room, the diary. Still open. Still warm. With a new page added. Fresh ink. Still wet. It read, Jason Gideon Whitmore, died to be decided. Jason stared at the fresh ink in the diary. Jason Gideon Whitmore, died to be decided. His hands trembled. The candlelight around him danced, casting shadows that crawled along the stone walls like they had a mind of their own. He stood slowly. The air felt heavier now, thicker. Every breath tasted like dust and metal. The diary was warm, too warm. Jason backed away from it and looked around. The room hadn't changed, not physically. The stone walls, the rows of beds, the flickering candles. But it felt different. Like something had been waiting and now it was awake. He turned to where the spiral mirror had been. Just a blank stone wall now. But something inside it still pulsed, still throbbed, still called to him. Jason clenched his fists, whispering to himself, "You're not part of this. You're not theirs." But the house disagreed. The whispering started again. Not in the walls. Not in the mirrors. Inside his head. A soft, scraping sound like nails brushing paper. Then words. "You've always belonged to us." Jason shook his head violently. No, I haven't." He turned to the exit, or where one should have been. He searched the room for any crack, any seam, any hidden latch in the stone. Nothing. Then, without warning, a sound. A click. A panel on the far wall slid open slowly, revealing a narrow staircase made of rotted wood leading upward. Jason didn't wait. He bolted toward it, the wood creaking with each step as he climbed. The walls narrowed, pressed close against his shoulders. Behind him, the panel slid shut, trapping the whispering voices below. The staircase went on longer than it should have, again. Like the space in this house was bending, stretching, playing tricks on distance. Finally, he reached the top. He pushed through a wooden door and stepped into another hallway. But this one was different. Silent. Still. Dead. The walls were blackened, scorched by fire. The wallpaper was melted and curled. Picture frames hung crooked and charred, their glass shattered and blackened. The floor was covered in ash. Jason moved slowly, coughing as the soot stirred. Each step left a print behind him. Footprints like a trail of proof he was still real, still here. The hallway was lined with doors, all closed. Each had a nameplate. He leaned closer to read one. Henrietta Whitmore. He turned to the next. Elsie Mae Whitmore. Next one. Daniel Whitmore. He moved faster now, scanning door after door. Matthew Gideon Whitmore. Sarah Whitmore. Eleanor Whitmore. All of them Whitmores. His family. He reached the end of the hallway. Only one door left. This one had no nameplate, just a spiral etched deep into the wood. His heart thudded. He reached out slowly and placed his hand against it. Warm. Of course it was. He pushed the door open. Inside was a room made entirely of mirrors. Ceiling, floor, walls. No furniture. No candles. Just mirrors, reflecting mirrors, reflecting mirrors. And in the center of the room, a child. A boy. Curled on the ground, knees to chest, arms over his head. Jason stepped forward cautiously. The boy looked familiar. Too familiar. He was wearing a red hoodie. The same one Jason wore when he was 10. Jason's breath caught in his throat. The boy lifted his head slowly and stared at him. Same eyes. Same face. Jason knelt down. "You're me," he whispered. The boy nodded once, then said, "You left me here." Jason shook his head. "I've never been here before." "Yes, you have," the boy said. "You came when you were 10. You walked into the house with your uncle. He said it was just for fun, just for one night. But he left. You didn't." Jason's vision blurred. Something sharp stabbed at the back of his mind. Memories trying to surface. A summer afternoon. An old house. A flashlight. A dare. A door that slammed shut. A scream. A blank. He looked around the room. The mirrors began to shimmer, not reflecting this moment, but others. One showed a child locked in a room, pounding on a door, crying for help. Another showed Jason's uncle walking away, back out into the daylight, eyes wide with guilt. Another showed the boy, young Jason, curled up and whispering to himself over and over for hours. 4 days. For years. Jason fell to his knees. "I forgot." The boy smiled sadly, but the house didn't. Jason looked at his younger self. "What happens now?" The boy stood, and suddenly, he wasn't a boy anymore. He was Jason, an exact copy, same height, same clothes, same age. The real Jason stared at him, stunned. "You left a part of yourself here," the doppelganger said. "You have to take it back, or the house will." The walls rumbled. The mirrors cracked. The spiral appeared on the floor beneath them, glowing faintly. The fake Jason tilted his head. It wanted a choice. The mirrors lit up one by one, each showing a door, hundreds of doors, all leading to different paths. "You can leave," the other Jason said, "but not alone." Jason looked around, mind spinning. "If I take you with me, the house lets us go?" The other nodded. "But if you leave me, if you leave the part of yourself behind again, it closes. Forever. And you become part of it." Jason stared into his reflection's eyes. He reached out his hand. The other Jason hesitated, then took it. Light exploded from beneath him. The spiral on the floor swirled faster, brighter, burning white and gold. The mirrors began to melt, not shatter. Melt like wax under flame. The two Jasons held tight. Then, darkness, silence, stillness. Jason woke up on the grass. Outside, it was morning. Birds chirped faintly in the trees. He sat up, blinking. The house stood behind him, old, silent. The front door hung open. Jason stood, staring at it. Then slowly, quietly, the door closed on its own. A final whisper drifted from the crack beneath it. "Thank you." Jason turned and walked away. He didn't look back. They found the house again 6 months later. Or rather, it found someone else. A group of college kids chasing local legends. They said it was abandoned, untouched for decades. But when they stepped inside, they found a single book open on the floor in the main hallway. A diary, with one page written in fresh ink. Jason Gideon Whitmore died. He did